In the 1860s, a collector examining an ancient burial site in Peru came across a human skull with a neat rectangular hole cut into the front of it. At first, it looked like damage, the work of a weapon or time, but it was not. The edges of the hole were smooth, and the bone around them had healed and grown back. This was not an injury. It was surgery, and it had been performed successfully on a living person thousands of years before the man holding the skull was born. That single skull forced a disturbing question onto the modern world. How far back does surgery actually go? The answer turned out to be almost unbelievable. Because when researchers started looking, they found these holes everywhere, and the oldest of them date back some 7,000 years to a time long before writing, before the wheel, before metal. People with sharpened stone were cutting holes into the heads of other people, and the patients were living through it. This is the story of trepanation, the deliberate drilling, cutting, or scraping of a hole into a living human skull. It is very probably the oldest operation in the world, and the question at the center of it is one we still cannot fully answer. Why on earth would anyone do this? A quick warning before we go further. This one is grim, and every word of it is true. Let us start with how astonishingly common it was. When archaeologists began examining ancient skulls in large numbers, they found trepanation on nearly every inhabited continent. In Europe, in Asia, across the Pacific, and most strikingly of all in the Americas. In the ancient burial sites of Peru alone, trepanned skulls have been found by the hundreds. This was not one strange culture doing one strange thing. Human beings all over the planet, with no contact between them, separated by whole oceans, independently arrived at the very same idea that sometimes the right thing to do was to open the skull, and they got frighteningly good at it. By studying how far the bone had healed, researchers can estimate how often patients survived. In some periods, the survival rate was dismayingly low, but in others, and this is the part that genuinely astonishes surgeons today, it appears to have been remarkably high. Among the ancient healers of Peru, studies of large skull collections suggest that a clear majority of patients lived. In the best cases, the estimated survival rate approaches figures that European hospitals, with their unwashed hands and filthy instruments, would not reliably match until the 19th century, and some skulls tell an even stranger story. A number of them show not one healed opening but 2, 3, even 7, meaning the same person underwent this operation multiple times across their life, and recovered each time. Think about what that means. It means the procedure was survivable enough, and trusted enough, that a person who had been through it once would willingly submit to it again and again. So how did they actually do it, with no anesthetic and no understanding of infection? The methods varied, and each one is more unsettling than the last. Some cultures scraped, grinding away at the bone slowly with a rough abrasive stone until it simply wore through. Some cut, carving a square by making 4 straight intersecting incisions and lifting out the freed piece of bone. Some drilled a ring of small, closely spaced holes and then cut between them to remove a clean disc. And some bored a single opening directly. For that last method, they developed a dedicated tool. Its earliest forms were simple, sharpened flint and obsidian, but over the centuries it evolved into something chillingly purpose-built, the trephine, a cylindrical instrument with a ring of teeth around its rim, turned like a carpenter's brace and bit to cut a perfect circle of bone from the head. The whole craft in every method came down to skill and restraint, getting through the hard bone without plunging into the soft tissue a fraction of an inch beneath it. A steady hand was the entire difference between a patient who walked away and one who did not. If the buried corners of our own history keep pulling you in like this, take a second to subscribe. Digging up the grimmest true stories our species has left behind is the entire reason this channel exists. And stay with this one, because the reasons they did it are stranger than the operation itself, and because it did not stay safely in the ancient past. Because now we come to the real mystery. Not how, but why. Why would people across the whole of human history take on the terrifying risk of opening a skull? For some cases, the answer is disturbingly practical. Many trepanned skulls show clear signs of injury, a fracture, a section of bone driven inward by a heavy blow to the head. In those cases, the operation makes a grim kind of sense. A violent impact can cause blood and swelling to build up beneath the skull, and that rising pressure is lethal. Cutting an opening relieves it. It is, in crude form, a a genuine neurosurgical principle still used in hospitals today. These ancient surgeons had somehow worked out, through observation and unimaginable trial and error, that a hole in the head could save a life. They were, in the most literal sense, performing brain surgery millennia before anyone knew what the brain actually did. But that explanation only covers some of the skulls. A great many trepanned skulls show no sign of injury at all. The bone is otherwise perfectly intact. There was no wound to treat. And so we are left staring at a far stranger possibility that people were opening healthy skulls deliberately for reasons that had nothing to do with any physical injury. The leading theory takes us into the mind. For most of human history, the true causes of illness were invisible and terrifying. Seizures, crippling migraines, mental illness, hallucinations, conditions we now understand as electrical and chemical events inside the brain were, to our ancestors, utterly inexplicable. And a very common explanation, found again and again across unconnected cultures, was possession, that something had gotten inside the person. An evil spirit, a demon, a malign presence, trapped within the walls of the skull. And if you truly believe that something is trapped inside a person's head, then the logic, however horrifying, becomes clear. You make an opening, you give the thing a way out. The hole in the skull was not only surgery. It may also have been an exorcism performed with a blade, a door cut into the bone to release whatever was tormenting the soul inside. There is even evidence for what became of the removed pieces of bone. Small discs of trepanned skull have been found smoothed and pierced, apparently worn as amulets, charms that carried the power of having survived the ordeal, or perhaps of having caged the very spirit that was let out. A person who lived through this could carry the proof of it around their neck for the rest of their days. And this is the point where most people assume the story ends. A savage practice of the deep past, abandoned once real medicine arrived. But that is not what happened. Trepanation was never abandoned, it simply grew up. The ancient Greeks did not just perform it, they wrote it down. In the medical texts attributed to Hippocrates around 2,500 years ago, there are detailed, sober instructions on how and when to open the skull, which injuries called for it, where to cut, and a warning to keep the drill wet so the friction did not burn the bone. This is the moment the operation crossed a line, from a prehistoric instinct passed between hands into written, reasoned, formal medicine. It was taught, it was studied, it had rules. And from there, it simply never stopped. It was practiced through the Roman world, through the medieval period with its brace and bit trephines, through the Renaissance, and it survived in recognizable form all the way into the modern surgical era. For thousands of unbroken years, one of the most consistent things human beings did, in the face of pain, madness, and injury they could not comprehend, was reach for a sharp tool and open the head. And here is the detail that should genuinely unsettle you. It is not even confined to history. In the 1960s, a small handful of people revived the practice entirely voluntarily, convinced that a permanent hole in the skull would raise their level of consciousness. At least one of them, unable to persuade any surgeon to do it, picked up a dental drill and performed the operation on himself, and then spent the rest of his life as a public advocate for it. The oldest surgery in the world had come all the way round again, and people were still, in living memory, choosing to drill into their own heads in search of something they could not otherwise reach. We tend to imagine that our ancestors were helpless before the mysteries of the body, that they simply suffered and prayed and waited to die. But trepanation tells a different and far more unsettling story. When faced with something they could not explain inside the human head, they did not do nothing. They acted with astonishing boldness, real anatomical cunning, and a survival rate that shames the assumptions we make about them. The theory behind it was often completely wrong. The courage and the skill were absolutely real. Which leaves one last uncomfortable question. Every single person in this story, the Stone Age healer, the Greek physician, the medieval surgeon, the man with the dental drill, believed with total confidence that cutting a hole into a human skull was sound, sensible, rational medicine. They were certain. So the question worth sitting with is this: what do we do today with that exact same total confidence that will look to our descendants precisely the way a hole drilled into a living skull looks to us? Tell us what you think down in the comments.